Hey everyone! We're about to embark on an incredible journey back in time, to the very dawn of civilization. We'll explore the fertile river valleys where humanity first dared to dream beyond mere survival, where the seeds of organized society were sown, and where the first monumental achievements of our species took root. From the unpredictable floods of Mesopotamia to the serene predictability of the Nile and the mysterious cities of the Indus, we'll uncover the ingenious solutions, the groundbreaking inventions, and the visionary leaders who laid the foundation for every single thing we call civilized today. But what exactly sparked this transformation? What was the single most crucial change that allowed scattered bands of hunter-gatherers to build towering pyramids and write epic poems? The answer lies not in a sudden discovery of gold or a new weapon, but in something far more fundamental, a shift so subtle yet so powerful it would forever change our relationship with the very earth beneath our feet. Before we start, I would like to know where you are watching this video from, and what time is it. Let me know in the comments down below. Also, while you are at it, please do like and subscribe so we can bring out more content like this. Now let's get started. For hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps even millions, humanity lived a life dictated by the rhythms of nature, a nomadic existence tethered to the movement of game and the seasonal bounty of wild plants. Our ancestors, the early Homo sapiens, were ingenious survivors, adapting to diverse environments across continents. They were hunter-gatherers, a term that, while simple, encompasses a sophisticated understanding of their surroundings, a deep knowledge of animal behavior, and an intimate familiarity with the flora of their territories. Their lives were a constant negotiation with the wilderness, a delicate balance between effort and reward, often marked by scarcity and the ever-present threat of the unknown. Imagine a small band of these early humans, perhaps 30 or 40 individuals, moving through a vast, untamed landscape. Their possessions were few. Tools crafted from stone, bone, and wood, hides for warmth and shelter, perhaps a few rudimentary containers. Every day was a quest for sustenance. The men might track herds of deer or wild cattle, employing cunning strategies and cooperative effort to bring down large prey. The women and children would forage for berries, roots, nuts, and edible leaves, their knowledge of plant life passed down through generations. This was a life of constant movement, following the migrations of animals or the ripening of fruits, rarely settling in one place for long. Their shelters were temporary, easily constructed and abandoned: caves, rock overhangs, or simple huts made of branches and animal skins. This Paleolithic era, the Old Stone Age, was incredibly long, stretching from the first appearance of stone tools, roughly 2.6 million years ago, until about 10,000 BCE. For the vast majority of human history, this was the only way of life. It shaped our biology, our social structures, and our very way of thinking. Groups were typically small, extended families or clans, bound by kinship and mutual reliance. Decisions were often made communally, and resources, when abundant, were shared. There was little concept of permanent ownership beyond personal tools or adornments. Survival was a collective endeavor, and the skills required were universally shared within the group: hunting, foraging, tool-making, firekeeping. The world at the end of the Paleolithic was still largely dominated by the last great ice age. Vast glaciers covered much of the northern continents, and global temperatures were significantly colder than today. Landscapes were different. Immense grasslands, tundra, and sparse forests stretched across regions that are now temperate or even tropical. But as the millennia passed, subtle shifts began to occur. The planet was slowly, almost imperceptibly, warming. The colossal ice sheets began their long retreat, melting and releasing vast amounts of water that reshaped coastlines and river systems. This environmental transformation was the silent prelude to one of the most profound revolutions in human history. As the ice receded, new ecosystems emerged. Forests expanded, and the distribution of wild animals changed. Crucially, in certain regions, particularly a crescent-shaped band of fertile land stretching from the Levant through Mesopotamia to the Persian Gulf, conditions became exceptionally favorable. This area, later known as the Fertile Crescent, was blessed with a Mediterranean climate characterized by wet winters and dry summers, which proved ideal for the growth of wild cereals like wheat and barley. These grains, though small, grew in dense stands, offering a concentrated and relatively stable food source, unlike anything previously encountered. It was in this context of environmental change and the burgeoning availability of wild grains that humanity began to experiment with a radical new idea. Instead of simply taking what nature offered, what if they could produce it? This shift from a food-acquiring economy to a food-producing one is what archaeologists and historians call the Neolithic Revolution, or sometimes the Agricultural Revolution. It wasn't a sudden event, a single eureka moment, but rather a gradual process, unfolding over thousands of years, with different communities adopting different aspects at different times. It was a revolution in the truest sense, overturning millennia of established human behavior and setting humanity on an entirely new trajectory. Before full-scale agriculture took hold, there were transitional phases. Some groups, like the Natufian culture in the Levant, around 12,500 BCE, began to settle down, at least semi-permanently. Even before they fully domesticated plants and animals, they lived in small villages, often built near abundant stands of wild cereals or rich fishing grounds. The discovery of large quantities of sickles, grinding stones, and storage pits at Natufian sites suggests an intensive harvesting of wild grains. This sedentism, this staying in one place, was a critical precursor. It meant people were investing more in their immediate surroundings, building more substantial dwellings, and developing a deeper connection to a specific territory. It also meant they were observing the life cycles of plants and animals more closely, perhaps noticing how seeds dropped on fertile ground would sprout, or how certain animals were more docile than others. The domestication of plants was a slow dance between human ingenuity and natural selection. It wasn't about planting a seed and instantly getting a field of domesticated wheat. It was a process of unconscious selection, followed by increasingly conscious intervention. Early hunter-gatherers would have noticed that certain wild grasses produced larger, more abundant seeds. When they harvested these, some seeds would inevitably fall to the ground near their temporary camps. These would sprout, and the next season, the new plants would be slightly more adapted to the disturbed ground and perhaps to human presence. Over generations, humans began to favor plants with desirable traits, larger seeds, non-shattering heads, meaning the seeds stayed on the stalk until harvested, rather than scattering naturally, and easier cultivation. Wheat and barley were among the first crops to be domesticated in the Fertile Crescent, around 9000 BCE. The implications were monumental. For the first time, humans could create a reliable food surplus. This surplus could be stored, providing sustenance through lean seasons and allowing for a larger, more stable population. The need for constant movement diminished. Instead of chasing their food, people could now grow it, tethering them to the land they cultivated. This led to the development of permanent settlements, which gradually grew into villages, and eventually, much later, into towns and cities. The very concept of home began to take on a new, more enduring meaning. Hand in hand with plant domestication came the domestication of animals. This was another revolutionary step, transforming the relationship between humans and the animal kingdom from one of predator and prey to one of mutual benefit. Goats and sheep were likely among the first animals to be tamed, perhaps around 8500 BCE in the Near East. They were relatively easy to manage, provided meat, milk, and wool, and could graze on land unsuitable for cultivation. Cattle and pigs followed, offering different resources and challenges. The domestication process involved selecting animals for docility, size, and specific traits like milk production or wool quality. The benefits of animal domestication were manifold. A ready supply of meat meant less reliance on unpredictable hunting. Milk provided a new source of protein and fat, especially valuable for children. Wool and hides offered materials for clothing and shelter. Animals also provided labor, eventually pulling plows and carts, revolutionizing agriculture and transport. Their manure fertilized fields, creating a sustainable agricultural cycle. This symbiotic relationship, where humans provided protection and food, and animals provided sustenance and labor, fundamentally altered the human diet, economy, and daily life. It was a profound shift from merely consuming nature's bounty to actively managing and shaping it. The transition to agriculture had a profound impact on human lifestyle and social structure. The nomadic existence which had defined humanity for so long began to recede in favor of sedentary life. Permanent dwellings replaced temporary shelters. These early homes, often built from mud brick or wattle and daub, were more substantial, reflecting a commitment to a specific place. As communities grew, so did the complexity of their living arrangements. The need for storage facilities for grain and other produce became paramount, leading to the development of granaries and specialized pottery. Initially, the health of early agriculturalists sometimes declined compared to their hunter-gatherer ancestors. A diet heavily reliant on a few staple crops could lead to nutritional deficiencies. Living in closer proximity to domesticated animals and other humans facilitated the spread of diseases. However, over time, the benefits of a more stable food supply and increased population density began to outweigh these initial drawbacks. Larger populations meant more hands for labor, more minds for innovation, and eventually, the capacity for greater specialization. New tools were invented or refined to support the agricultural lifestyle. Sickles, often made of flint blades set into wooden or bone handles, were used for harvesting grain. Grinding stones became essential for processing cereals into flour. Pottery, once a rare luxury, became ubiquitous, used for cooking, storage, and transport. The ability to create durable, heat-resistant containers revolutionized food preparation and preservation. This technological advancement was directly driven by the demands of a settled, agricultural existence. With a surplus of food and a settled lifestyle, not everyone had to be involved in the direct production of food. This allowed for the beginnings of labor specialization. Some individuals might become skilled potters, others toolmakers, still others might focus on building or weaving. This division of labor led to increased efficiency and the production of more sophisticated goods. It also laid the groundwork for new social dynamics, as different skills and roles began to acquire varying levels of status within the community. As populations grew and people lived in closer proximity, new forms of social organization began to emerge. While early agricultural villages were likely relatively egalitarian, the increasing complexity of managing resources, resolving disputes, and coordinating communal projects, like irrigation systems where they developed, would have necessitated some form of leadership or decision-making structure. This wasn't necessarily a rigid hierarchy like later kingdoms, but perhaps the emergence of respected elders, skilled shamans, or influential families. The concept of land ownership, or at least the rights to cultivate specific plots, also began to develop, leading to new forms of social tension and cooperation. One of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries of recent times profoundly challenged our understanding of this transition. Göbekli Tepe, in southeastern Turkey. Discovered in the mid-1990s and dating back to around 9,600 to 8,200 BCE, Göbekli Tepe predates the widespread adoption of agriculture and even pottery. What makes it so revolutionary are its monumental stone structures, massive, T-shaped pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, intricately carved with reliefs of animals like boars, foxes, lions, snakes, and birds. These pillars are arranged in circular enclosures, suggesting a sophisticated, planned construction effort. The implications of Göbekli Tepe are immense. For decades, the prevailing theory was that complex societies, monumental architecture, and organized religion only arose after the development of agriculture, as a result of food surpluses, allowing for specialization and leisure time. Göbekli Tepe turns this on its head. Here was a site built by hunter-gatherers, or at least by people who were not yet fully agriculturalists, demonstrating an astonishing level of communal organization, artistic expression, and possibly religious belief. It suggests that shared spiritual or ceremonial needs might have been a driving force for large-scale cooperation and settlement, rather than simply a consequence of agricultural surplus. The effort required to quarry, transport, and erect these massive stones would have necessitated a significant coordinated labor force, implying a level of social cohesion and leadership previously thought impossible for pre-agricultural groups. It forces us to reconsider the very definition of civilization and its origins, suggesting that perhaps the human need for meaning and shared ritual was as powerful a catalyst for change as the need for food. Another pivotal site, offering a glimpse into the early stages of settled life, is Çatalhöyük, also in Anatolia, Turkey, dating from around 7,500 to 5,700 BCE. Unlike Göbekli Tepe, which appears to have been a purely ceremonial center, Çatalhöyük was a massive Neolithic settlement, a proto-city that housed thousands of people. Its unique architecture is striking. Houses were built right next to each other, with no streets or alleys between them. Residents entered their homes through holes in the roofs, accessing them via ladders. The rooftops themselves served as thoroughfares, communal spaces, and work areas. Imagine walking across a vast flat expanse of rooftops, occasionally seeing smoke rising from hearths below, or people engaged in daily tasks. The houses themselves were made of mud brick, often plastered and repainted, with distinctive features like raised platforms for sleeping and elaborate wall paintings depicting hunting scenes, geometric patterns, and even a possible map of the settlement itself. Burials were often found beneath the floors of the houses, suggesting a deep connection between the living and their ancestors, and a continuity of family within the same dwelling over generations. Çatalhöyük provides rich evidence of early village life. The inhabitants cultivated wheat, barley, and peas, and domesticated sheep and goats. They also continued to hunt wild animals, indicating a mixed economy. The site reveals a sophisticated material culture, including obsidian tools traded from distant sources, pottery, woven textiles, and numerous figurines, some depicting plump female figures, often interpreted as fertility goddesses or ancestors. Despite its size and population, Çatalhöyük appears to have lacked a clear centralized authority or monumental public buildings, unlike the later cities of Mesopotamia. This suggests a more egalitarian social structure, where individual households maintained a high degree of autonomy, even within a densely packed community. The absence of streets and the roof-based access might have contributed to this, limiting the development of public spaces for large-scale gatherings or displays of power. The story of Çatalhöyük is one of human adaptation and innovation, of learning to live in close quarters, managing waste, and maintaining social cohesion without a formal state apparatus. It represents a crucial step in the journey from small, scattered farming villages to the much larger, more complex urban centers that would define the next stage of civilization. It shows how communities could grow and thrive through cooperation and shared cultural practices, even before the advent of elaborate political structures or writing. The innovations of agriculture and settled life, emerging first in the Fertile Crescent, did not remain confined to this region. Over millennia, the knowledge of cultivating crops and domesticating animals slowly spread outwards, a process sometimes called diffusion. Farmers migrated, carrying their seeds and livestock with them. Ideas and techniques were exchanged between neighboring groups. This spread wasn't always uniform or rapid. It was a complex tapestry of adaptation, resistance, and integration. From the Near East, agriculture moved into Europe, across North Africa, and into parts of Asia. Independent centers of domestication also arose in other parts of the world, such as rice cultivation in East Asia, maize in Mesoamerica, and potatoes in the Andes, demonstrating humanity's widespread capacity for innovation when faced with similar environmental opportunities and challenges. The dawn of agriculture was not merely a change in how humans acquired food, it was a fundamental reordering of human existence. It led to a dramatic increase in population density, the development of permanent settlements, and the beginnings of specialized labor. It fostered new technologies and new ways of thinking about time, land, and community. It laid the essential groundwork for the emergence of social hierarchies, organized religion, and eventually the complex political and economic structures that would define the world's first true cities and civilizations. Without this profound transformation, the urban centers, the writing systems, the monumental architecture, and the empires that would follow would have been impossible. It was the quiet, slow revolution that set the stage for all the dramatic acts of human history that were yet to unfold. Having explored the foundational shift from nomadic hunter-gatherer life to settled agriculture, we now turn our attention to the specific geographical crucible where the first true civilizations, as we largely understand them, began to flourish. This region, known as Mesopotamia, is often referred to as the cradle of civilization, and for good reason. It is a land of immense historical significance, a place where many of the innovations that define complex human societies first took root. Mesopotamia, a Greek word meaning land between the rivers, refers to the vast alluvial plain situated between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. These two mighty rivers, originating in the mountains of Anatolia, flow southeastward, eventually emptying into the Persian Gulf. This region, encompassing modern-day Iraq, parts of Syria, Turkey, and Iran, was not uniformly fertile. Its northern reaches, often called Upper Mesopotamia, received sufficient rainfall for rain-fed agriculture. However, it was in the southern part, Lower Mesopotamia, where the most transformative developments occurred. This was a flat, hot, and arid plain, receiving minimal rainfall. Yet paradoxically, it was here that the earliest and most impactful civilizations arose. The paradox is resolved by understanding the unique hydrological characteristics of the Tigris and Euphrates. Unlike the Nile, which had a predictable annual flood cycle, the Mesopotamian rivers were far more erratic. Their floods, caused by snowmelt in the distant mountains, could be sudden, violent, and unpredictable, often occurring at the wrong time for crops. The land itself was a mixture of fertile silt deposited by the rivers and vast, unproductive marshlands and deserts. This seemingly hostile environment, however, presented both a challenge and an immense opportunity. The challenge was clear: how to harness the unpredictable waters for irrigation and how to manage the marshlands. The opportunity lay in the incredible fertility of the river-deposited silt. If water could be controlled and delivered to the fields, the land could yield abundant harvests, far exceeding what rain-fed agriculture could produce. This necessity, the imperative to manage water, became a powerful catalyst for collective action and social organization. No single family or small village could build and maintain the elaborate canal systems required to irrigate large tracts of land or drain swamps. It demanded cooperation on an unprecedented scale. The earliest inhabitants of southern Mesopotamia, long before the Sumerians, were likely small groups of agriculturalists who had migrated from the more hospitable foothills of the Zagros Mountains. Bringing with them the knowledge of farming, they would have initially settled near natural watercourses, gradually experimenting with simple ditches to divert water to their fields. Over time, as populations grew and the desire for greater agricultural output increased, these simple ditches evolved into complex networks of canals, reservoirs, and dikes. This process was iterative, each improvement building upon the last, demanding ever greater coordination and labor. The construction and maintenance of these irrigation systems were monumental tasks. Canals had to be dug, often for many miles through flat terrain. They needed to be regularly cleared of silt, a constant battle against the river's natural tendency to deposit sediment. Dikes were necessary to protect settlements and fields from destructive floods. This required a hierarchical organization. Someone had to plan the canals, mobilize the labor, allocate resources, and resolve disputes over water rights. This collective effort, driven by the need to survive and thrive in a challenging environment, is widely seen as a primary driver for the emergence of complex social structures and eventually centralized authority. Beyond agriculture, Mesopotamia was rich in other resources crucial for early development. The rivers provided fish, and the marshlands teemed with reeds, which were used for building materials, baskets, and even boats. Clay, abundant throughout the region, became the fundamental raw material for everything from pottery and bricks to writing tablets. However, Mesopotamia was notably deficient in other vital resources: timber, stone, and metals. This scarcity would later drive extensive trade networks, connecting Mesopotamia with distant lands and further stimulating economic and social complexity. The earliest identifiable culture in southern Mesopotamia is the Ubaid period, dating roughly from 6500 to 4100 BCE. During this period, small, scattered farming villages gradually transformed into larger settlements. Archaeological evidence from Ubaid sites shows a consistent material culture across a wide area, suggesting either a shared cultural tradition or extensive interaction between communities. We see the development of distinctive pottery, the use of mud brick architecture, and the presence of small rectangular temples, indicating the beginnings of organized religion. These temples, though modest, were often built on raised platforms, a precursor to the massive ziggurats of later periods. They likely served as centers of communal activity, perhaps for storing surplus food or for administering irrigation projects, blurring the lines between religious, economic, and political functions. The Ubaid period also saw the emergence of a social hierarchy. While not as pronounced as in later civilizations, some houses were larger and contained more elaborate artifacts than others, suggesting differences in wealth or status. The presence of seals, small carved objects used to mark ownership or authenticate documents, indicates an increasing concern with property and administration. These were the slow foundational steps, the incremental changes that laid the groundwork for the more dramatic transformations of the succeeding Uruk period. The Uruk period, roughly 4100 to 2900 BCE, represents a pivotal moment in human history, often considered the true dawn of urbanism and the precursor to the first state-level societies. It is named after the ancient city of Uruk, which became the largest and most influential settlement of its time. During this period, a dramatic shift occurred. What had been large villages rapidly grew into massive urban centers, true cities. Unlike anything seen before, Uruk itself, at its peak, may have covered an area of over 500 hectares, nearly 2 square miles, and housed tens of thousands of people, making it the largest city in the world at that time. The growth of Uruk and other contemporary cities was fueled by a combination of factors. The continued perfection of irrigation techniques allowed for even greater agricultural surpluses, which could support a larger non-farming population. This surplus, in turn, allowed for more extensive labor specialization. No longer did everyone need to be a farmer. There were now full-time priests, administrators, scribes, artisans, merchants, and soldiers. This division of labor was a hallmark of urban life, leading to increased efficiency and the production of a wider range of goods and services. The city of Uruk was dominated by its monumental architecture, particularly its temple complexes. The two most prominent were the Enna district, dedicated to the goddess Inanna, later Ishtar, and the Anu district, dedicated to the sky god Anu. These were not merely places of worship, they were the economic and administrative hearts of the city. The temples owned vast tracts of land, employed thousands of people, and managed the collection and redistribution of agricultural surplus. They were centers of craft production, storage, and trade. The sheer scale of these structures, built from millions of mud bricks, speaks to the immense organizational capacity and centralized power that had emerged. The most iconic architectural feature of the Uruk period, and indeed of later Mesopotamian civilizations, was the ziggurat. While the earliest ziggurats were more like stepped platforms, they evolved into massive multi-tiered temple towers, symbolizing the connection between the earthly realm and the heavens. Building these structures required not only vast amounts of labor, but also sophisticated planning and engineering. The construction of a ziggurat was a communal undertaking, reinforcing social cohesion and demonstrating the power and prestige of the ruling elite, who were often priests or priest-kings. The emergence of cities brought about a fundamental transformation in social organization. Life in a city was fundamentally different from life in a small village. Anonymity increased, and kinship ties, while still important, were supplemented by new forms of social cohesion based on shared civic identity or professional guilds. The need to manage a large, diverse population, to allocate resources, to enforce laws, and to defend the city from external threats led to the development of complex administrative systems and a more formalized government. This was the birth of the state. The Uruk period also witnessed the invention of the wheel, a seemingly simple innovation with profound consequences. Early evidence suggests the wheel was first used for pottery making, as a potter's wheel, around 3500 BCE. Soon after, it was adapted for transport, leading to the development of wheeled carts and chariots. This revolutionized agriculture, allowing farmers to transport heavier loads over longer distances, and transformed warfare, providing new mobility for armies. The wheel, along with the plow, another Mesopotamian innovation, dramatically increased agricultural productivity and facilitated trade and communication. Perhaps the single most important innovation of the Uruk period, and indeed one of the most significant achievements in human history, was the invention of writing. The earliest forms of writing, known as proto-cuneiform, emerged in Uruk around 3400 to 3200 BCE. It was not invented for poetry or literature, but for practical, administrative purposes. The massive temple economies of Uruk needed a way to keep track of vast quantities of goods, grain, livestock, textiles, and labor. How many sheep were brought in? How much barley was distributed to workers? How many jars of oil were stored? The human memory was simply insufficient for such complex accounting. Early proto-cuneiform consisted of pictographs, simple drawings representing objects, e.g., a head of grain, an ox, a hand. These were incised onto wet clay tablets using a stylus made of reed. Over time, these pictographs became more abstract and stylized. The stylus, when pressed into the clay, created wedge-shaped marks, giving rise to the name cuneiform, from the Latin cuneus, meaning wedge. The system also evolved to represent not just objects, but also ideas, and crucially, phonetic sounds. This phonetic development was a major breakthrough, allowing for the expression of complex thoughts and grammatical structures. The invention of writing created a new class of specialists, scribes. Learning cuneiform was a complex and lengthy process, requiring years of training. Scribes held a position of immense power and prestige in Mesopotamian society, as they controlled the flow of information and managed the vast administrative apparatus of the temples and later, the palaces. Writing enabled the creation of permanent records, laws, historical accounts, and eventually literature. It allowed for the transmission of knowledge across generations and over vast distances, fundamentally changing the nature of human communication and the organization of society. The Uruk period also saw the development of cylinder seals. These small cylindrical stones, often made of semi-precious materials, were intricately carved with scenes and symbols. When rolled over wet clay, they left a continuous impression, serving as a signature or a mark of ownership. Cylinder seals were used to authenticate documents, seal jars and storerooms, and mark property. They were not only practical tools but also works of art, providing valuable insights into Mesopotamian mythology, daily life, and social hierarchies. The scenes depicted often included deities, mythical creatures, rituals, and scenes of daily life, offering a visual narrative of their world. The transition from the Uruk period to the early dynastic period, circa 2900 to 2350 BCE, saw the consolidation of the city-state system. While Uruk had been dominant, other cities like Uruk, Lagash, Kish, and Nippur grew in power and influence. Each city-state was an independent political entity, comprising a city and its surrounding agricultural hinterland. They were often ruled by a lugal, meaning great man or king, or an ensi, a priestly governor, who derived their authority from the city's patron deity. These rulers were responsible for maintaining the irrigation systems, leading armies, administering justice, and overseeing religious rituals. The early dynastic period was characterized by intense rivalry and warfare between these competing city-states. Each city believed its patron deity was supreme, and conflicts over land, water rights, and trade routes were common. Archaeological evidence, such as the Standard of Ur, depicts scenes of both peace and war, showcasing the military organization and equipment of the period. This constant state of conflict likely spurred further military innovation and the development of fortifications around cities. Despite the rivalries, there was a shared cultural identity across Sumer, expressed through common religious beliefs, artistic styles, and the cuneiform writing system. The Sumerians, the people who inhabited southern Mesopotamia during these formative periods, were responsible for many of these groundbreaking innovations. Their language, Sumerian, is a linguistic isolate, meaning it is not related to any other known language family. They developed a rich mythology and pantheon of gods and goddesses, each associated with specific cities and natural forces. Their religious beliefs permeated every aspect of life, with the temples serving as the central institutions of their society. The priests and priest-kings were seen as intermediaries between the human and divine realms, responsible for ensuring the favor of the gods through rituals and offerings. The Sumerians were also pioneers in mathematics and astronomy. They developed a sexagesimal base 60 number system, which is still evident today in our division of time, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and circles, 360 degrees. This system allowed them to perform complex calculations, essential for land surveying, architecture, and astronomical observations. Their astronomical knowledge, though primarily driven by religious and astrological concerns, was remarkably accurate for its time, enabling them to track the movements of celestial bodies and develop a sophisticated calendar. The legacy of Mesopotamia, and particularly the innovations of the Sumerians, cannot be overstated. They invented the wheel, the plow, irrigation systems, monumental architecture, and the earliest known writing system. They developed complex administrative structures, laws, and religious institutions. They laid the foundations for urban living, trade, and organized warfare. Their achievements were not isolated. They spread throughout the Near East and beyond, influencing subsequent civilizations like the Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, and even distant cultures. The very concept of civilization as we understand it, with its cities, states, and specialized labor, owes an immeasurable debt to the fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates. The constant need to manage the unpredictable rivers, to cooperate on massive irrigation projects, and to defend against rival city-states fostered a unique environment for innovation and social complexity. It was a land where human ingenuity was constantly challenged, and in turn produced solutions that transformed the human condition. The stories of their kings, their gods, their epic poems, and their daily lives, etched into countless clay tablets, provide a vivid window into a world that, while ancient, laid the very groundwork for our own. The cradle of civilization was indeed a fertile ground, not just for crops, but for the ideas and institutions that would shape the future of humanity. Following the foundational developments in agriculture and the establishment of the fertile Mesopotamian plain as a crucible for innovation, we now arrive at a truly transformative stage in human history, the emergence of the first cities. This was not merely an increase in population density, but a qualitative leap in human organization, social complexity, and monumental ambition. The region of Sumer, located in southern Mesopotamia, became the epicenter of this urban revolution, giving rise to settlements that were unlike anything the world had ever seen. These were not just large villages, they were vibrant, complex urban centers, true cities in every sense of the word. The term Sumer refers to the geographical and cultural region of southern Mesopotamia, inhabited by the Sumerians, a people whose origins remain somewhat debated, but who were undeniably the architects of this urban transformation. Their language, Sumerian, stands unique, unrelated to the Semitic languages that would later dominate the region. It was in Sumer, particularly during the Uruk period, that the concept of the city-state took its definitive form, a model of political and social organization that would profoundly influence subsequent civilizations. At the heart of this urban revolution stood Uruk, a city whose name echoes through history as arguably the world's first true metropolis. Located on a now dry ancient channel of the Euphrates River, Uruk began as a cluster of small Ubaid period settlements. But around 4100 BCE, it began an astonishing period of growth and development that would see it become the largest and most influential city of its time. By its peak, around 2900 BCE, Uruk is estimated to have covered an area of over 500 hectares, or roughly 2 square miles, and may have housed between 40,000 and 80,000 inhabitants. This was an unprecedented concentration of people, a sprawling urban landscape that dwarfed any previous human settlement. The growth of Uruk was not accidental. It was the result of a confluence of factors, many of which were discussed in the previous chapter. The mastery of large-scale irrigation systems allowed for immense agricultural surpluses in the fertile lands surrounding the city. This surplus was the lifeblood of urbanism, freeing a significant portion of the population from direct food production and enabling them to specialize in other crafts, trades, and administrative roles. This division of labor was a defining characteristic of city life, leading to a level of economic complexity previously unimaginable. Imagine walking through the streets of ancient Uruk. While much of it would have been densely packed residential areas built from the ubiquitous mud brick, the city's skyline would have been dominated by its monumental temple complexes. These were not merely places of worship, but colossal centers of economic, administrative, and political power. The two most prominent districts were the Anorna district, dedicated to Anorna, the goddess of love, fertility, and warfare, and the Anu district, dedicated to Anorna, the sky god. These complexes were vast, enclosed by massive walls, and contained numerous temples, courtyards, workshops, and storage facilities. The temples were the beating heart of the Uruk economy. They owned vast tracts of land, managed extensive agricultural production, and employed thousands of people, from farmers and artisans to scribes and priests. They collected and redistributed goods, acting as central hubs for the city's resources. This temple-centric economy meant that religious and secular authority were deeply intertwined, with the priests and priest-kings holding immense power, seen as intermediaries between the human realm and the divine forces that governed their world. The sheer scale of these religious structures, built from millions of sun-dried and sometimes fired mud bricks, speaks volumes about the organizational capacity and centralized authority that had emerged. The most iconic architectural feature of Uruk, and indeed of later Mesopotamian civilizations, was the ziggurat. While the earliest structures at Uruk were more like stepped platforms, these were the precursors to the towering ziggurats that would later define Mesopotamian urban landscapes. These massive, multi-tiered temple towers were not designed for congregational worship in the modern sense, but rather as symbolic mountains, connecting the earthly city with the heavens. They were believed to be the dwelling places of the gods, and only priests and the highest elite were permitted to ascend to their summits. The construction of such colossal structures required not only immense labor, but also sophisticated planning, engineering, and a unified vision, reinforcing social cohesion and demonstrating the power and prestige of the ruling elite. The emergence of cities brought about a fundamental transformation in social organization. Life in Uruk was profoundly different from life in a small agricultural village. The sheer number of people living in close proximity led to new forms of social interaction and identity. Kinship ties, while still important, were supplemented by new forms of cohesion based on shared civic identity, professional guilds, or religious affiliations. The anonymity of the city also increased, requiring more formalized systems of governance and law to maintain order and resolve disputes among a diverse population. The need to manage a large, diverse population, to allocate resources efficiently, to enforce rules, and to defend the city from external threats led to the development of complex administrative systems and a more formalized government. This was the birth of the state, an entity with a defined territory, a centralized authority, and the capacity to mobilize labor and resources on a grand scale. The rulers of Uruk, whether priest-kings or secular leaders, held immense power, overseeing vast bureaucracies that managed everything from irrigation networks to trade expeditions. One of the most profound innovations to emerge from Uruk was the invention of writing. The earliest forms, known as proto-cuneiform, appeared around 3400 to 3200 BCE. It was not born out of a desire for literature or philosophical treatises, but from the pragmatic needs of the burgeoning urban economy. The massive temple complexes and their associated administrative structures needed a way to keep track of vast quantities of goods, grain, livestock, textiles, and labor. How many sheep were brought into the temple storehouses? How much barley was distributed to the workers? How many jars of oil were stored? The human memory, even of a dedicated administrator, was simply insufficient for such complex accounting. Early proto-cuneiform tablets were essentially accounting records. They consisted of pictographs, simple drawings representing objects, e.g. a head of grain, an ox, a hand, often accompanied by numerical signs. These were incised onto wet clay tablets using a stylus made of reed. The clay, once dried, provided a durable and permanent record. Over time, these pictographs became more abstract and stylized. The stylus, when pressed into the wet clay, created distinctive wedge-shaped marks, giving rise to the name cuneiform, from the Latin cuneus meaning wedge. The evolution of cuneiform was a gradual but revolutionary process. Initially, it was a logographic system, where each sign represented a word or concept. But eventually, the system evolved to represent not just objects, but also ideas, and crucially, phonetic sounds, syllables. This phonetic development was a major breakthrough, allowing for the expression of complex thoughts, grammatical structures, and eventually, entire narratives. It moved writing beyond mere accounting to become a tool for history, law, literature, and intellectual discourse. The invention of writing created a new and powerful class of specialists, scribes. Learning cuneiform was an incredibly complex and lengthy process, requiring years of rigorous training in specialized schools. Scribes held a position of immense power and prestige in Mesopotamian society, as they controlled the flow of information, managed the vast administrative apparatus of the temples and later the palaces, and served as the memory keepers of the state. Writing enabled the creation of permanent records, laws, historical accounts, and eventually, epic poems and literary works. It allowed for the transmission of knowledge across generations and over vast distances, fundamentally changing the nature of human communication and the organization of society. The ability to record and transmit information accurately and permanently was a game changer, allowing for more complex governance and the accumulation of knowledge. Alongside writing, the Uruk period also saw the widespread use and refinement of cylinder seals. These small cylindrical stones, often made of semi-precious materials like lapis lazuli or carnelian, were intricately carved with scenes and symbols. When rolled over wet clay, they left a continuous raised impression, serving as a signature, a mark of ownership, or a form of authentication. Cylinder seals were used to authenticate documents, seal jars and storerooms, and mark property. They were not only practical administrative tools but also exquisite works of art, providing valuable insights into Mesopotamian mythology, daily life, and social hierarchies. The scenes depicted often included deities, mythical creatures, rituals, and scenes of daily life, offering a visual narrative of their world and beliefs. The intricate detail on these tiny objects speaks to a high level of artistic skill and craftsmanship. The Uruk period also witnessed the invention of the wheel, a seemingly simple innovation with profound consequences that reverberated across the ancient world. While early evidence suggests the wheel was first used for pottery making, as a potter's wheel, around 3500 BCE, its adaptation for transport soon followed. This led to the development of wheeled carts, and later, chariots. This revolutionized agriculture, allowing farmers to transport heavier loads of produce from fields to city centers, increasing efficiency. It also transformed warfare, providing new mobility for armies and goods. The wheel, along with the plow, another Mesopotamian innovation that significantly increased agricultural output, dramatically increased agricultural productivity, and facilitated trade and communication over longer distances. The ability to move goods more efficiently further fueled the growth of cities and their economies. Beyond Uruk, other significant Sumerian cities also rose to prominence during the early dynastic period, Su 2900 to 2350 BCE. Cities like Uruk, Lagash, Kish, Nippur, and Eridu each developed into powerful independent city-states. While Uruk had been dominant during its formative period, the early dynastic era was characterized by a system of competing independent city-states. Each city-state was a self-governing political entity, comprising a central city and its surrounding agricultural hinterland, often including smaller towns and villages. These city-states were typically ruled by a lugal, meaning great man or king, or an ensi, a priestly governor, who derived their authority from the city's patron deity. The ruler was seen as the earthly representative of the god, responsible for maintaining the irrigation systems, leading armies, administering justice, and overseeing religious rituals and the prosperity of the city. The palace, as the seat of the lugal, began to rival the temple in terms of administrative and economic power, signaling a gradual shift towards a more secular form of governance, though religious legitimacy remained paramount. The early dynastic period was characterized by intense rivalry and frequent warfare between these competing city-states. Each city believed its patron deity was supreme, and conflicts over land, water rights, trade routes, and access to scarce resources like timber and stone were common. Archaeological evidence, such as the Standard of Ur, a mosaic box depicting scenes of both peace and war, vividly showcases the military organization and equipment of the period, including chariots and disciplined infantry. This constant state of conflict likely spurred further military innovation, the development of sophisticated fortifications around cities, and the emergence of professional soldiers. Despite the rivalries, there was a shared cultural identity across Sumer, expressed through common religious beliefs, artistic styles, and the ubiquitous cuneiform writing system, which served as a unifying intellectual force. The Sumerians developed a rich and complex religious system, with a vast pantheon of gods and goddesses, each associated with specific cities, natural forces, and aspects of human life. Enlil, the god of wind and storms, was a prominent deity, as was Enki, the god of water, wisdom, and creation. Nana, Sin, was the moon god, and Utu, Shamash, was the sun god. In Nana, Ishtar was the goddess of love, fertility, and warfare, and her cult was particularly important in Uruk. Their religious beliefs permeated every aspect of life, from daily rituals to grand temple ceremonies. The temples served as the central institutions of their society, not only as places of worship, but also as economic powerhouses and administrative centers. The priests and priest-kings were seen as intermediaries between the human and divine realms, responsible for ensuring the favor of the gods through elaborate rituals, offerings, and the maintenance of cosmic order. Beyond their practical innovations, the Sumerians were also pioneers in abstract thought, particularly in mathematics and astronomy. They developed a sophisticated sexagesimal base 60 number system, which is still evident today in our division of time, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and circles, 360 degrees. This system allowed them to perform complex calculations, essential for land surveying, architecture, and astronomical observations. Their mathematical prowess enabled them to create intricate calendars, divide land, and manage complex accounting for their vast temple and palace economies. Their astronomical knowledge, though primarily driven by religious and astrological concerns, was remarkably accurate for its time, enabling them to track the movements of celestial bodies and predict astronomical events. They observed the stars and planets, identifying constellations and mapping their movements, believing these celestial patterns held clues to divine will and earthly events. The Sumerians also left behind a rich literary tradition, preserved on thousands of clay tablets. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest surviving works of literature, tells the story of Gilgamesh, a legendary king of Uruk, and his quest for immortality. This epic, with its themes of friendship, loss, the search for meaning, and the inevitability of death, offers profound insights into Sumerian worldview and human universal experiences. Other literary works include myths, hymns, lamentations, and wisdom literature, providing a window into their spiritual beliefs, moral codes, and daily concerns. The very act of committing these stories to writing ensured their survival for millennia, allowing us to connect with the minds and imaginations of these ancient people. The legacy of Sumer and its first cities is immense and enduring. They invented the wheel, the plow, sophisticated irrigation systems, monumental architecture, and the earliest known writing system. They developed complex administrative structures, laws, and religious institutions. They laid the foundations for urban living, extensive trade networks, and organized warfare. Their achievements were not isolated. They spread throughout the Near East and beyond, influencing subsequent civilizations like the Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, and even distant cultures. The very concept of civilization as we understand it, with its cities, states, specialized labor, and written records, owes an immeasurable debt to the fertile plains of Sumer and the ingenuity of its people. The rise of the city in Sumer was a testament to human adaptability and collective endeavor. It demonstrated humanity's capacity to transform a challenging environment into a cradle of innovation, to organize vast populations, and to create enduring cultural and technological legacies. The Sumerian city-states, with Uruk at their forefront, were laboratories of human society, where the fundamental elements of civilization were first forged. Their achievements resonate even today, reminding us of the profound impact of these ancient urban pioneers on the trajectory of human history. The noise and bustle of Uruk, the solemn rituals in its towering ziggurats, the meticulous work of its scribes, and the daily lives of its thousands of inhabitants represent a pivotal moment when humanity truly began to build a new world, one brick at a time. Having witnessed the monumental rise of the first cities in Sumer, particularly Uruk, we now turn to an innovation that was not merely a consequence of urban complexity, but an indispensable tool for its very functioning and continued development. This was the invention of writing, a breakthrough so profound that it fundamentally altered the course of human history, marking the transition from prehistory to history. Before writing, knowledge and traditions were passed down orally, vulnerable to the frailties of memory and the distortions of retelling. With writing, information could be recorded, stored, and transmitted with unprecedented accuracy and permanence, creating a cumulative body of knowledge that could grow and evolve independently of individual human lives. The earliest forms of writing did not spring forth fully formed as a sophisticated literary tool. Instead, they emerged from the pragmatic, mundane needs of the burgeoning urban economies of Sumer, particularly in the vast and complex temple-palace administrations of cities like Uruk. Imagine the sheer volume of goods flowing through these centers: thousands of bushels of grain, hundreds of sheep, countless jars of oil, textiles and tools. Thousands of laborers were employed, their rations needing to be tracked, tribute and taxes were collected, and trade goods exchanged. The human memory, no matter how trained, simply could not cope with the sheer volume and complexity of these transactions. A system for reliable record-keeping became an absolute necessity. Before the development of proto-cuneiform, there were simpler methods of accounting. For centuries, people in the Near East had used small clay tokens of various shapes to represent different commodities. A cone might represent a small measure of grain, a sphere a larger measure, a cylinder an animal. These tokens could be placed inside hollow clay balls known as bullae, which were then sealed. Impressions of the tokens were sometimes made on the outside of the bullae, or a flat tablet might be impressed with the tokens. This system, while ingenious, had limitations. It was cumbersome, and the tokens themselves did not convey information about the transaction itself, only the quantity of items. It was a precursor, a step on the path towards a more abstract and flexible system. The true breakthrough occurred in Uruk around 3400 to 3200 BCE, with the development of proto-cuneiform. This earliest writing system was primarily pictographic. Scribes would incise simple drawings or pictograms onto wet clay tablets using a stylus, typically a sharpened reed. A drawing of a head of grain represented grain, an ox head represented ox, and a human hand might represent hand or to give. These pictograms were often accompanied by numerical signs, allowing administrators to record quantities of goods. For example, a drawing of a fish followed by 3 lines could mean 3 fish. Initially, the signs were direct representations of objects, but as the system evolved, the pictograms began to represent not just the object itself, but also associated ideas or concepts. For instance, a drawing of a foot might represent foot, but also to walk or to stand. This was a significant step towards abstract representation. Crucially, the scribes also began to rotate the pictograms, and over time, the images became increasingly stylized and abstract, losing their direct resemblance to the objects they represented. This shift was partly driven by efficiency. It was quicker and easier to draw a series of wedge-shaped marks than a detailed picture. The distinctive wedge-shaped marks that give cuneiform its name emerged from the way the stylus was pressed into the soft clay. Instead of dragging the stylus, which could tear the clay, scribes began to press the corner of a reed stylus into the clay, creating a neat triangular impression. By varying the angle and direction of the stylus, they could create a wide array of different wedge combinations. This made writing faster and more uniform, though it also made the signs less pictorial and more abstract. The most revolutionary development in the evolution of cuneiform was the shift from a purely logographic system to a system that incorporated phonetic elements. This meant that signs could represent not just entire words or concepts, but also sounds, specifically syllables. For example, a sign that originally depicted an arrow, Sumerian T, could also be used to represent the sound T, in other words, regardless of its meaning. This phonetic principle, often called the rebus principle, was a game changer. It allowed scribes to write abstract concepts, proper names, and grammatical elements that could not be easily depicted pictographically. It transformed cuneiform from a system of mnemonic aids into a flexible tool capable of recording spoken language. The full development of cuneiform, incorporating both logographic and phonetic signs, occurred around 2600 BCE. By this time, the system had become incredibly sophisticated, capable of expressing the full range of human thought. The number of signs, though still large, hundreds, was manageable for trained scribes. The complexity of the system, however, meant that learning to read and write cuneiform was a specialized skill, requiring years of rigorous training. This led to the establishment of formal scribal schools, known as Ediba, Sumerian for tablet house. These schools were highly structured institutions where young boys, and occasionally girls, though rarely, would spend years mastering the art of cuneiform. The curriculum was demanding, involving rote memorization of signs, copying of literary texts, mathematical exercises, and legal precedents. Students would practice writing on clay tablets, which were then dried and preserved. Thousands of these school tablets have been excavated, providing invaluable insights into the Sumerian educational system and their intellectual pursuits. Scribes occupied a position of immense power and prestige in Mesopotamian society. They were the literate elite, the keepers of knowledge, and the backbone of the administrative apparatus. They worked in temples, palaces, and private businesses, managing accounts, drafting legal documents, recording historical events, and composing literary works. A skilled scribe could rise to high positions, serving as advisors to kings or chief administrators of vast estates. Their control over information and their ability to communicate across time and space made them indispensable to the functioning of the complex urban state. The invention of writing had profound and far-reaching consequences. Firstly, it enabled the creation of permanent records. No longer were laws, treaties, or historical events dependent on oral tradition. They could be inscribed on clay tablets, stone monuments, or cylinder seals, ensuring their preservation for generations. This allowed for the accumulation of knowledge and the development of more complex legal and administrative systems. For example, the ability to record land ownership or debt obligations in writing provided a new level of security and facilitated more complex economic transactions. Secondly, writing allowed for the efficient management of vast resources and populations. The temple and palace economies, with their complex systems of taxation, labor mobilization, and redistribution, would have been impossible without written records. Scribes could track agricultural yields, inventory goods in storehouses, calculate rations for workers, and manage trade expeditions to distant lands. This administrative efficiency was crucial for the growth and stability of the city-states. Thirdly, writing facilitated the development of sophisticated legal systems. While oral traditions had their own forms of justice, writing allowed for the codification of laws, ensuring consistency and transparency. The most famous example, though from a later period, is the Code of Hammurabi, which would have been impossible without the foundation laid by Sumerian cuneiform. Written laws could be publicly displayed, allowing citizens to know their rights and responsibilities, and providing a basis for judicial decisions. Fourthly, writing enabled the transmission of knowledge across generations and over vast distances. Scientific, mathematical, and astronomical observations could be recorded and built upon by successive generations of scholars. Medical knowledge, religious rituals, and technological instructions could be preserved and disseminated. This cumulative knowledge was a powerful engine for intellectual and technological progress. Without writing, each generation would have had to rediscover much of what its predecessors had learned. Fifthly, and perhaps most profoundly, writing gave birth to literature. Once the system evolved to capture the nuances of spoken language, scribes began to record myths, hymns, epic poems, and wisdom literature. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest surviving works of literature, is a testament to the power of cuneiform to convey complex narratives and profound human experiences. This epic, telling the story of a legendary king of Uruk and his quest for immortality, reveals Sumerian beliefs about life, death, friendship, and the human condition. Other literary genres included lamentations for destroyed cities, proverbs offering moral guidance, and disputation texts where opposing forces, like summer and winter, or copper and silver, debated their merits. These texts provide invaluable insights into Sumerian worldview, values, and intellectual life. The materials used for writing were readily available in Mesopotamia. Clay abundant from the rivers was the primary medium. Scribes would take a lump of wet clay, shape it into a small, often rectangular tablet, and then use a reed stylus to impress the signs. The tablets could vary greatly in size, from small, palm-sized receipts to large, multi-columned literary works. Once inscribed, the tablets could be left to air dry, making them durable enough for temporary records, or they could be baked in a kiln, making them virtually indestructible and suitable for permanent archives. Thousands upon thousands of these clay tablets have been unearthed by archaeologists, providing an unparalleled window into ancient Mesopotamian society. The process of writing itself was meticulous. The scribe would hold the stylus, typically a cut reed with a triangular tip, and press it into the soft clay. The angle and depth of the impression determined the shape of the wedge. The scribe would write from left to right, usually in columns, and then turn the tablet over to continue on the reverse side. Once a tablet was filled, it might be stored in a basket or on a shelf in a temple or palace archive. These archives, sometimes containing tens of thousands of tablets, served as the libraries and record offices of the ancient world. The invention of cuneiform was not a static event. It continued to evolve and adapt over millennia. While it originated with the Sumerian language, its flexibility allowed it to be adopted by successive empires and cultures that came to dominate Mesopotamia. The Akkadians, a Semitic-speaking people who conquered Sumer around 2350 BCE, adopted cuneiform to write their own language, Akkadian. Later, the Babylonians and Assyrians, who also spoke dialects of Akkadian, continued to use cuneiform, further refining and expanding its repertoire of signs. Even non-Mesopotamian languages, such as Elamite, Hurrian, and Hittite, adapted cuneiform for their own purposes, demonstrating its widespread influence and adaptability. The decipherment of cuneiform in the 19th century CE was a monumental intellectual achievement, akin to the cracking of the Rosetta Stone for Egyptian hieroglyphs. Scholars like Henry Rawlinson, Edward Hincks, and Jules Oppert painstakingly worked on inscriptions found at sites like Behistun, which contained the same text in Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian cuneiform. By comparing the known Old Persian script with the unknown cuneiform, they were able to gradually unlock the secrets of this ancient writing system, opening up a vast trove of historical, literary, and administrative documents that had been silent for thousands of years. The ability to read cuneiform transformed our understanding of ancient Mesopotamia, revealing a civilization far more complex and sophisticated than previously imagined. The legacy of cuneiform is profound. It was the world's first true writing system, laying the groundwork for all subsequent scripts. It enabled the rise of complex states, sophisticated economies, and the accumulation of knowledge. It allowed for the creation of enduring literature, laws, and historical records. It fundamentally changed the way humans interacted with information, moving from the ephemeral nature of oral tradition to the permanence of the written word. The scribes of Sumer, with their humble clay tablets and reed styluses, were the unsung heroes of this revolution, meticulously recording the details of their world, unaware that their efforts would provide a direct link to future generations, allowing us to hear the faint echoes of their voices across the vast expanse of time. The birth of writing was not just an invention, it was the birth of history itself. Having explored the remarkable innovations of the Sumerian city-states, particularly the rise of urbanism and the invention of writing, we now move to a new and pivotal phase in Mesopotamian history, the emergence of the world's first empire. For centuries, the Sumerian city-states had flourished, each an independent political entity, often engaged in rivalry and conflict, yet bound by a shared culture, language, and religious system. This era of independent city-states, however, was destined to be challenged by a new force, one that would fundamentally alter the political landscape of Mesopotamia and introduce the concept of a unified, multi-ethnic empire. This transformative shift was spearheaded by the Akkadians, a Semitic-speaking people who had long resided in central Mesopotamia, north of the Sumerian heartland. While the Sumerians had developed the first cities and writing, the Akkadians brought a new political vision, the idea of uniting disparate city-states and territories under a single, centralized rule. This was a radical departure from the prevailing model of independent urban centers, and it would be achieved through military conquest and astute administration. The figure most synonymous with this apocal change is Sargon of Akkad. His origins are shrouded in legend, but what is clear is his meteoric rise from humble beginnings to become the founder of the Akkadian Empire. According to later Mesopotamian traditions, Sargon was a man of modest birth, perhaps a cupbearer to the king of Kish, a prominent Sumerian city-state. Through a combination of military prowess, strategic alliances, and sheer ambition, he seized power in Kish and then embarked on a series of conquests that would reshape the ancient world. Sargon's military campaigns were swift and decisive. He systematically conquered the independent Sumerian city-states one by one, bringing them under his dominion. His army was well organized and disciplined, perhaps employing new tactics or technologies that gave them an edge over the traditional city-state militias. The Sumerian cities, accustomed to fighting each other, were ill-prepared for a unified force with a grander vision of conquest. Sargon's victories were not merely about subjugating cities, they were about integrating them into a larger political entity, an empire. The core of Sargon's power was his newly founded capital city, Akkad. The precise location of Akkad remains one of archaeology's enduring mysteries, but its historical significance is undeniable. It was from Akkad that Sargon launched his campaigns and administered his vast new empire. The founding of a new capital, distinct from the ancient Sumerian centers, symbolized a break from the past and the establishment of a new political order. Akkad became the administrative and cultural heart of the empire, a testament to Sargon's ambition and vision. The Akkadian Empire, established by Sargon around 2350 BCE, stretched from the Persian Gulf in the south to parts of northern Mesopotamia and Syria in the north. It encompassed a diverse array of peoples, including Sumerians, Akkadians, and various other ethnic groups. This was the first time such a vast and diverse territory had been brought under a single political authority in the Near East. Sargon's empire was not just a collection of conquered territories, it was a centralized state with a unified administration, a standing army, and a common imperial ideology. One of Sargon's key strategies for maintaining control over his vast empire was the appointment of loyal officials, often Akkadians, to govern the conquered Sumerian cities. He also appointed his own daughters to high priestly positions in important Sumerian religious centers, such as in Hedwana, who became the high priestess of the moon god Nana in and the goddess Inanna in Uruk. This clever move integrated the religious authority of the conquered territories into the imperial structure, fostering loyalty and legitimizing Akkadian rule. Hedwana herself was a remarkable figure, a poet and priestess, whose hymns and literary works are among the earliest known compositions by an identifiable author. The Akkadian Empire brought about significant changes in language and culture. While Sumerian remained the language of scholarship and religious texts for centuries, Akkadian, a Semitic language, became the language of administration and everyday communication throughout the empire. This linguistic shift was gradual but profound, eventually leading to the decline of spoken Sumerian. However, the Akkadians adopted and adapted the Sumerian cuneiform writing system to write their own language, demonstrating the enduring power and flexibility of this invention. The cuneiform script continued to evolve, becoming even more streamlined and efficient under Akkadian influence. Economically, the Akkadian Empire facilitated long-distance trade on an unprecedented scale. With a unified political authority, trade routes were safer and more efficient. Resources from distant lands, such as timber from Lebanon, copper from Oman, and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, flowed into the imperial capital and other major cities. This increased trade stimulated economic growth and further integrated the diverse regions of the empire. The empire's vast reach also allowed for the mobilization of resources and labor for large-scale imperial projects, such as building temples and palaces. Sargon's reign laid the groundwork for a new concept of kingship. Unlike the Sumerian city-state rulers who derived their authority primarily from their patron deities and their role as administrators of the temple economy, Akkadian kings began to emphasize their military prowess and their personal achievements as sources of legitimacy. Sargon presented himself as a conqueror, a unifier, and a divinely favored ruler who had brought order to a chaotic world. This shift towards a more militaristic and centralized kingship would become a recurring theme in subsequent Mesopotamian empires. After Sargon's long and successful reign, the empire was inherited by his sons, Rimush and Manishtushu, who faced numerous rebellions from the subjugated Sumerian cities. This constant struggle to maintain control highlighted the inherent challenges of governing such a vast and diverse empire. The Sumerian city-states, with their long traditions of independence, resented Akkadian rule and frequently rose in revolt. The Akkadian kings had to constantly assert their authority through military force, demonstrating the fragility of early imperial structures. The most famous successor to Sargon was his grandson, Naram-Sin. Naram-Sin's reign is often considered the zenith of the Akkadian Empire. He continued the expansionist policies of his grandfather, pushing the empire's boundaries even further, reaching as far as Anatolia in the north and Elam, modern-day Iran, in the east. Naram-Sin adopted the title King of the Four Quarters, signifying his claim to universal dominion. He also took the unprecedented step of deifying himself during his lifetime, a practice previously reserved for gods. This self-deification was a bold assertion of imperial power, elevating the king to a divine status and further centralizing authority around his person. The Victory Stele of Naram-Sin is a magnificent artistic representation of Akkadian imperial ideology. This large stone relief depicts Naram-Sin as a triumphant warrior king, trampling over his enemies, his horned helmet signifying his divine status. He stands tall, gazing up at celestial bodies, symbolizing his connection to the gods. The stele is not just a record of a military victory, it is a powerful piece of propaganda, celebrating the king's might, his divine favor, and the glory of the Akkadian Empire. It reflects a new emphasis on the individual ruler as a heroic figure, distinct from the more collective or priestly leadership of earlier Sumerian times. Despite its impressive achievements, the Akkadian Empire eventually succumbed to internal strife and external pressures. The exact reasons for its collapse around 2050 BCE are debated by historians, but several factors likely contributed. Constant rebellions from the conquered territories drained imperial resources and manpower. Administrative challenges of governing such a vast and diverse empire proved immense. There is also evidence of environmental factors, such as a prolonged drought in northern Mesopotamia, which may have led to widespread famine and population displacement, putting immense pressure on the imperial core. The final blow may have come from incursions by nomadic groups from the Zagros Mountains, particularly the Gutians. These groups, often described as barbarians in later Mesopotamian texts, raided and plundered the empire, contributing to its fragmentation. The collapse of the Akkadian Empire ushered in a period of decentralization and chaos in Mesopotamia, with various city-states regaining their independence and the Gutians establishing a brief period of dominance. This period is sometimes referred to as the Dark Age of Mesopotamia, though it was a time of transition rather than complete collapse. However, the legacy of the Akkadian Empire was profound and enduring. Even in its collapse, Sargon and Naram-Sin had demonstrated that it was possible to unite disparate city-states and territories under a single centralized rule. The concept of empire, of a vast multi-ethnic state governed by a single powerful monarch, had been born. This idea would profoundly influence subsequent Mesopotamian civilizations, such as the Neo-Sumerian Third Dynasty, the Old Babylonian Empire, and the mighty Assyrian and Neo-Babylonian empires, all of whom consciously or unconsciously drew upon the Akkadian model of imperial rule. The Akkadian period also left an indelible mark on Mesopotamian culture. Akkadian language, though initially a rival to Sumerian, eventually became the dominant lingua franca of the Near East for centuries, influencing later languages like Babylonian and Assyrian. Akkadian art, exemplified by the Victory Stela of Naram-Sin and the exquisite bronze head believed to be Sargon, showed a new naturalism and a focus on the individual ruler, distinct from earlier Sumerian styles. The Akkadians also adopted and adapted Sumerian religious traditions, integrating their own deities into the existing pantheon and contributing to the rich tapestry of Mesopotamian mythology. The rise and fall of the Akkadian Empire provided valuable lessons for future rulers. It demonstrated the immense power that could be wielded by a centralized state, but also the challenges inherent in maintaining control over a vast and diverse population. The constant need to suppress rebellions, manage resources, and defend borders would become defining characteristics of all subsequent empires. The Akkadian experiment, though relatively short-lived compared to the long history of Sumerian city-states, fundamentally changed the political imagination of Mesopotamia, setting a precedent for large-scale territorial states. The Akkadian period represents a crucial turning point in the story of civilization. It moved beyond the city-state model to introduce the concept of empire, a political structure designed to unite and control vast territories and diverse peoples. Sargon of Akkad, the architect of this first empire, stands as a towering figure in ancient history, a pioneer of imperial rule whose achievements and challenges would resonate for millennia. His legacy was not just a fleeting period of dominance, but a fundamental shift in the scale and ambition of human political organization, laying the groundwork for all future empires that would rise and fall across the ancient world. The echoes of Akkad's ambition and its eventual struggles would serve as a powerful lesson for those who sought to follow in its footsteps. Having journeyed through the dynamic and often tumultuous landscape of Mesopotamia, where the first cities and empires rose and fell, we now shift our gaze westward to another great river valley that nurtured one of the most enduring and iconic civilizations in human history, ancient Egypt. While Mesopotamia was characterized by competing city-states and a more fragmented political landscape, Egypt developed a remarkably unified and stable civilization, largely due to the unique geographical and environmental conditions provided by the Nile River. The Nile is the longest river in the world, flowing over 6,600 kilometers from its sources in Central Africa northward to the Mediterranean Sea. For ancient Egyptians, the river was not just a waterway, it was the very lifeblood of their existence, a divine gift that shaped their worldview, their economy, and their political structure. Unlike the unpredictable Tigris and Euphrates, the Nile had a remarkably consistent and predictable annual flood cycle. Every summer, heavy rains in the Ethiopian highlands and snowmelt from the mountains of East Africa would swell the river, causing it to overflow its banks in Egypt between July and October. This annual inundation was not a destructive force but a benevolent one. As the floodwaters receded, they left behind a rich black layer of fertile silt deposited directly onto the agricultural lands along the riverbanks. This natural fertilization meant that the soil was perpetually renewed, allowing for incredibly productive agriculture with minimal effort compared to the complex irrigation systems required in Mesopotamia. The Egyptians called their land Kemet, meaning the Black Land, referring to this fertile dark soil, in contrast to Deshret, the Red Land, which was the barren desert on either side of the river. The geographical layout of Egypt further contributed to its unique development. The Nile Valley is a long, narrow ribbon of fertility, flanked on both sides by vast, inhospitable deserts. To the north, the river branches into a wide delta, a fan-shaped expanse of fertile marshland, and channels before emptying into the Mediterranean. To the south, the river's flow is punctuated by 6 cataracts, rocky stretches that made river navigation difficult, effectively isolating Egypt from direct invasion from the south. The deserts to the east and west, and the sea to the north, provided natural barriers, protecting Egypt from external threats and fostering a sense of insularity and continuity. This geographical isolation, combined with the predictable bounty of the Nile, led to a civilization characterized by remarkable stability and longevity, spanning over 3 millennia. Unlike Mesopotamia, where frequent invasions and internal conflicts led to a succession of empires and dynasties, Egypt experienced long periods of unified rule, punctuated by relatively brief periods of decentralization or foreign domination. This stability fostered a profound sense of order, continuity, and a strong belief in the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth, mirroring the annual cycle of the Nile. Before the unification of Egypt, the land was divided into 2 distinct regions: Upper Egypt, the narrow valley in the south, and Lower Egypt, the broad delta in the north. Each region had its own distinct traditions, symbols, and rulers. The process of unification, a pivotal moment in Egyptian history, is traditionally attributed to a king named Menes, though this figure might be a composite of several early rulers, most notably Narmer. The Narmer palette, a ceremonial cosmetic palette dating to around 3100 PME, is a key archaeological artifact depicting the unification of the 2 lands. It shows King Narmer wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt on one side and the red crown of Lower Egypt on the other, symbolically representing his dominion over both. The unification of Egypt under a single pharaoh marked the beginning of the early dynastic period, Sui 30 Puls 100 to 2686 BCE. This period saw the establishment of the foundational institutions of the Egyptian state. The pharaoh, the king of Egypt, became the central figure, seen not merely as a ruler but as a living god, the embodiment of Horus, and later the son of Ra. This divine kingship was a cornerstone of Egyptian political and religious ideology. The pharaoh was responsible for maintaining Ma'at, the cosmic order, justice, and balance, ensuring the prosperity of the land and the well-being of its people. His authority was absolute, extending over all aspects of Egyptian life. The capital of the unified kingdom was established at Memphis, strategically located at the junction of Upper and Lower Egypt. allowing the pharaoh to effectively control both regions. This central location facilitated communication and administration across the long river valley. The early pharaohs began to consolidate their power, establishing a centralized bureaucracy to manage the vast resources of the kingdom, including agricultural production, labor, and public works. The early dynastic period also saw the development of Egyptian hieroglyphic writing. Like Mesopotamian cuneiform, hieroglyphs emerged from administrative needs, but they also had a strong religious and monumental function. The word hieroglyph comes from Greek words meaning sacred carvings, reflecting their use on temples, tombs, and monuments. Early hieroglyphs were pictographic, representing objects or ideas, but they quickly evolved to include phonetic signs, representing sounds, and determinatives, signs that clarified the meaning of a word. This allowed for a flexible and sophisticated writing system capable of expressing complex religious texts, historical narratives, and administrative records. Unlike cuneiform, which was primarily written on clay tablets, hieroglyphs were often carved into stone, painted on tomb walls, or written on papyrus, a material made from the reeds growing along the Nile. Papyrus was a revolutionary writing material, lighter and more portable than clay tablets, facilitating the spread of written communication. Scribes, like their Mesopotamian counterparts, held a privileged position in Egyptian society, undergoing extensive training to master the complex script. Their meticulous work ensured the preservation of Egyptian history, religious beliefs, and administrative records for millennia. The true flowering of ancient Egyptian civilization, and the period most associated with its iconic monumental architecture, was the Old Kingdom, Xween 236 to 231. This era is often called the Age of the Pyramids, a testament to the colossal building projects undertaken by the pharaohs. These pyramids were not merely tombs, they were massive statements of royal power, religious belief, and the organizational capacity of the Egyptian state. They were designed to protect the pharaoh's body and possessions, ensuring his successful journey to the afterlife and his continued ability to intercede on behalf of Egypt with the gods. The first pyramid, the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, was built for King Djoser of the Third Dynasty by his brilliant vizier and architect Imhotep. This revolutionary structure, a series of mastabas, rectangular flat-top tombs stacked one upon another, was the first monumental stone building in history. It represented a radical departure from earlier mud brick tombs and set the precedent for the magnificent pyramids that followed. Imhotep himself became a legendary figure, later deified as a god of medicine and architecture, a testament to the profound impact of his genius. The culmination of pyramid building occurred during the Fourth Dynasty, with the construction of the Great Pyramids of Giza for pharaohs Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, the largest of the three, was for millennia the tallest man-made structure in the world, a staggering achievement of engineering and labor. It is estimated to have required millions of precisely cut stone blocks, some weighing many tons, transported from distant quarries and meticulously assembled. The construction of these pyramids was not solely the work of slaves, as often popularly believed, but involved a massive, organized workforce of skilled craftsmen, engineers, and seasonal laborers, likely farmers who worked on the pyramids during the annual flood season when their fields were inundated. The construction of the pyramids reflects the core tenets of Egyptian religious belief, particularly the elaborate cult of the dead and the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. Egyptians believed in a complex afterlife, and the pharaoh, as a divine being, needed to be properly prepared for his transition to the realm of the gods. The pyramids served as a gateway, a cosmic mountain that facilitated this journey. Within the pyramid, the pharaoh's body was mummified to preserve it, and his tomb was filled with grave goods, everything he would need in the afterlife, from furniture and jewelry to food and tools. The walls of the burial chambers were often adorned with intricate carvings and paintings, depicting scenes from daily life, religious rituals, and spells from texts like the pyramid texts, designed to guide the pharaoh through the dangers of the underworld. The Old Kingdom was a period of immense centralization and prosperity. The pharaoh, supported by a vast bureaucracy of viziers, scribes, priests, and provincial governors, nomarchs, exercised tight control over the entire kingdom. The economy was centrally managed, with resources flowing from the provinces to the capital and then redistributed. The stability provided by the Nile's predictable floods and the unified political structure allowed for long periods of peace and cultural flourishing. Art, architecture, and religious practices became highly standardized, reflecting a strong sense of national identity and a deep reverence for tradition. Egyptian society was highly stratified, with the pharaoh at the apex, followed by the royal family, viziers, high priests, and military commanders. Below them were scribes, artisans, and skilled craftsmen, who formed a vital middle stratum. The vast majority of the population consisted of farmers and laborers, who worked the land and provided the manpower for the pharaoh's monumental projects. While there was a clear hierarchy, Egyptian society was not entirely rigid. Individuals could, to some extent, improve their social standing through education and service to the state, particularly by becoming a scribe. The Old Kingdom eventually declined, leading to the First Intermediate Period, circa 2111-2055 BCE, a time of decentralization and political fragmentation. The power of the nomarchs, provincial governors, grew at the expense of the central authority, leading to a weakening of the pharaoh's control. Economic hardship, possibly exacerbated by low Nile floods or administrative inefficiencies, also contributed to the decline. However, this period of disunity was relatively short-lived compared to the long periods of stability. The Middle Kingdom, circa 2055 to 1650 BCE, saw the reunification of Egypt under the pharaohs of the 11th and 12th dynasties. This period is often characterized by a renewed emphasis on central authority, a flourishing of literature and art, and significant territorial expansion, particularly into Nubia, modern-day Sudan, to secure valuable resources like gold. The pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom also undertook ambitious irrigation projects, expanding agricultural land and further harnessing the power of the Nile. They built fortresses along the southern border to protect their interests and facilitated trade with the Near East. The concept of the afterlife also became more democratized during the Middle Kingdom. While in the Old Kingdom, the elaborate preparations for the afterlife were primarily reserved for the pharaoh and the highest elite. During the Middle Kingdom, the belief in an afterlife and the associated rituals became more accessible to common people. Coffin texts, written on the coffins of non-royal individuals, provided spells and guidance for the deceased's journey through the underworld, reflecting this broader accessibility to eternal life. The stability and prosperity of the Middle Kingdom eventually gave way to the Second Intermediate Period, circa 1050 to 1550 BCE, marked by the invasion and rule of the Hyksos, a foreign group from the Near East who introduced new military technologies, such as the horse-drawn chariot and composite bow, to Egypt. Although a period of foreign domination, the Hyksos rule also stimulated innovation and ultimately led to the rise of the New Kingdom, one of Egypt's most powerful and expansionist phases. The enduring legacy of ancient Egypt is immense. Its monumental architecture, particularly the pyramids and temples, continues to inspire awe and wonder. Its religious beliefs, with their emphasis on the afterlife, divine kingship, and the maintenance of cosmic order, profoundly shaped Egyptian society for millennia. Its writing system, hieroglyphs, preserved a vast body of knowledge and literature. Its art, characterized by its distinctive conventions and timeless beauty, offers a unique window into their worldview. The Egyptians' mastery of agriculture, their sophisticated administration, and their unique adaptation to the rhythms of the Nile created a civilization of unparalleled longevity and influence. The gift of the Nile was indeed profound. It provided the predictable resources and geographical isolation that allowed for the development of a highly centralized, stable, and culturally rich civilization. Unlike the turbulent history of Mesopotamia, Egypt's story is one of remarkable continuity, a testament to the power of a unified vision and the enduring influence of a mighty river. The pharaohs, with their divine authority and the meticulous work of their scribes and builders, created a civilization that, even today, stands as a symbol of ancient grandeur and timeless mystery. Having explored the unique geographical advantages of the Nile and the initial unification of Egypt, we now delve deeper into the core tenets that defined this extraordinary civilization, particularly during its most iconic period, the Old Kingdom. This era, often referred to as the Age of the Pyramids, was a time when the concepts of divine kingship, an elaborate afterlife, and monumental architecture converged to create a society unparalleled in its ambition and its enduring legacy. At the heart of this was the pharaoh, seen not merely as a ruler but as a living god, and the pyramids, colossal structures built to ensure his eternal journey and the prosperity of the entire kingdom. The pharaoh was the absolute monarch of Egypt, a figure of immense power and sacred authority. Unlike the kings of Mesopotamia, who were seen as representatives or stewards of the gods, the Egyptian pharaoh was considered a god himself, the embodiment of Horus, the falcon-headed deity, and later the son of Ra, the sun god. This divine status was the cornerstone of Egyptian political and religious ideology, providing an unshakable foundation for the pharaoh's rule. His word was law, his decisions unquestionable, and his very presence ensured the cosmic order of Ma'at, a concept encompassing truth, justice, balance, and harmony, without which the world would descend into chaos. This belief in the pharaoh's divinity was not just a political convenience, it was deeply ingrained in the Egyptian worldview. The pharaoh was the intermediary between humanity and the gods, responsible for performing rituals, making offerings, and ensuring the annual inundation of the Nile, which was vital for agricultural prosperity. His health and well-being were inextricably linked to the prosperity of the land and its people. Therefore, ensuring the pharaoh's successful transition to the afterlife was not merely a personal concern for the king, but a matter of national security and cosmic stability. The elaborate cult of the dead, and particularly the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife, was the driving force behind the most recognizable symbols of ancient Egypt, the pyramids. These colossal structures were not just tombs, they were complex architectural and religious machines designed to facilitate the pharaoh's transition from the earthly realm to the divine. They were cosmic mountains, gateways to eternity, providing a secure resting place for the pharaoh's mummified body and a repository for all the grave goods he would need in the next world. Before the pyramids, royal tombs were typically mastabas, rectangular, flat-top structures with sloping sides, built over an underground burial chamber. While impressive for their time, they lacked the monumental scale and symbolic power that would soon emerge. The revolutionary leap in funerary architecture came with King Djoser of the Third Dynasty, c. 2670 BCE, whose brilliant vizier and architect, Imhotep, conceived of the step pyramid at Saqqara. Imhotep's genius lay in his vision to stack several mastabas of decreasing size on top of each other, creating a towering step structure. This was the first monumental stone building in history, a radical departure from the traditional mud brick construction. The step pyramid complex was not just the pyramid itself, it was a vast enclosure containing temples, courtyards, and various symbolic buildings, all designed to serve the pharaoh in the afterlife. The use of durable stone rather than perishable mud brick signaled a new ambition to create structures that would last for eternity, mirroring the Egyptians' belief in eternal life. Imhotep's innovation was so profound that he was later deified, becoming a god of medicine and architecture, a testament to his lasting impact on Egyptian civilization. The step pyramid set the precedent for the true pyramids that followed, culminating in the awe-inspiring structures of the Fourth Dynasty, see plate Sumerian 2002. Sneferu, Khufu's father, was a prolific builder, experimenting with different pyramid designs, including the bent pyramid and the red pyramid at Dashur, refining the techniques that would be used for the Great Pyramids of Giza. His innovations in quarrying, transporting, and precisely cutting massive stone blocks were crucial for the later achievements. The apex of pyramid construction was reached with the Great Pyramids of Giza, built for pharaohs Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, the largest of the three, is a truly staggering feat of engineering. For over 3,800 years, it remained the tallest man-made structure in the world. It stands as a testament to the organizational capacity, mathematical knowledge, and sheer manpower of the Old Kingdom. It is estimated to have required millions of precisely cut stone blocks, some weighing many tons, transported from distant quarries across the Nile, and meticulously assembled. The precision with which these massive blocks were fitted together, often without mortar, is still a source of wonder and debate among modern engineers. The construction of these pyramids was not, as often popularly believed, solely the work of enslaved people. While some forced labor might have been involved, the primary workforce consisted of a massive, organized contingent of skilled craftsmen, engineers, and seasonal laborers. These laborers were likely Egyptian farmers who worked on the pyramids during the annual flood season when their fields were inundated and agricultural work was impossible. This system provided employment, food, and a sense of national purpose, as contributing to the pharaoh's eternal journey was seen as a religious duty that ensured the well-being of the entire kingdom. Archaeological evidence from the workers' villages at Giza reveals a well-fed, well-organized community with bakeries, breweries, and medical care, suggesting a professional and well-supported workforce. The construction process was incredibly complex. Stone was quarried from sites like Tura for fine white limestone casing, and Aswan for granite. Massive barges transported the blocks across the Nile during the flood season. Once on site, ramps were likely used to drag the blocks up the pyramid's rising levels. The exact methods of ramp construction and stone placement are still debated, but they undoubtedly involved immense coordination, precise measurements, and a deep understanding of practical mechanics. The orientation of the pyramids to the cardinal points, and their alignment with celestial bodies, also speaks to a sophisticated understanding of astronomy and geometry. The pyramids were just one component of vast funerary complexes. Each pyramid was accompanied by a mortuary temple, where rituals and offerings were performed for the deceased pharaoh, and a causeway leading to a valley temple, often located near the Nile, where the pharaoh's body would have been prepared for burial. Surrounding the pyramids were mastabas and smaller pyramids for queens, royal family members, and high officials, all seeking to be buried near their divine ruler and partake in his journey to the afterlife. The entire complex was a sacred landscape, designed to serve the pharaoh's eternal needs. The elaborate cult of the dead was central to Egyptian religious belief. Egyptians believed that death was not an end, but a transition to another realm, the Duat or underworld, from which the deceased could achieve eternal life in the field of reeds, a paradise mirroring earthly existence. To achieve this, the body had to be preserved, and the soul, composed of various elements like the Ka, Ba, and Ah, needed to be able to recognize and reunite with the body. This led to the practice of mummification, a complex and lengthy process designed to preserve the body as intact as possible. Mummification involved removing internal organs, except the heart, believed to be the seat of intelligence and emotion, drying the body with natron salt, anointing it with oils and resins, and then wrapping it in layers of linen bandages. This meticulous process could take up to 70 days. Once mummified, the body was placed in a series of nested coffins, often elaborately decorated, and then interred in the tomb. The tomb itself was filled with grave goods, everything the deceased would need in the afterlife, from furniture, clothing, and jewelry, to food, drink, and tools. Small figurines called ashaptais were also included, magically animated to perform labor for the deceased in the afterlife. The walls of the burial chambers and mortuary temples were often adorned with intricate carvings and paintings. These scenes depicted aspects of daily life, religious rituals, offerings to the gods, and magical spells. For the pharaohs of the Old Kingdom, these spells were collected in the pyramid texts, inscribed on the walls of their burial chambers. These were the earliest known religious texts, providing instructions, prayers, and incantations designed to guide the pharaoh through the dangers of the underworld and ensure his successful rebirth among the stars. The text reflect a deep concern with cosmic order, the role of the gods, and the pharaoh's unique relationship with the divine. The Old Kingdom was a period of immense centralization and prosperity, largely due to the pharaoh's absolute authority and the efficient administration that supported him. A vast bureaucracy of viziers, scribes, priests, and provincial governors, nomarchs, managed the kingdom's resources. The vizier, the pharaoh's chief minister, was the most powerful official, overseeing all aspects of government, from justice to treasury. Scribes were the backbone of this administration, meticulously recording everything from agricultural yields to court decrees. The economy was centrally managed, with resources flowing from the provinces to the capital at Memphis, and then redistributed. The stability provided by the Nile's predictable floods and the unified political structure allowed for long periods of peace and cultural flourishing. Art, architecture, and religious practices became highly standardized, reflecting a strong sense of national identity and a deep reverence for tradition. The distinctive conventions of Egyptian art, its composite figures, hieratic scale, and emphasis on order and timelessness, were largely established during this period. Egyptian society was highly stratified, with the pharaoh at the absolute apex. Below him were the royal family, who held privileged positions and often served as high priests or viziers. Then came the powerful elite, viziers, high priests of the major cults, and military commanders. Below them were the scribes, who formed a vital and respected middle stratum, their literacy granting them access to administrative roles and opportunities for social mobility. Artisans, skilled craftsmen, and overseers also occupied important positions. The vast majority of the population consisted of farmers and laborers, who worked the land and provided the manpower for the pharaoh's monumental projects. While there was a clear hierarchy, Egyptian society was not entirely rigid. Individuals could, to some extent, improve their social standing through education and service to the state, particularly by becoming a scribe or excelling in a craft. Despite its grandeur, the Old Kingdom eventually experienced a decline, leading to the First Intermediate Period, Swen 2000–2055 BCE. The reasons for this decline are complex and multifaceted. The immense cost of building the pyramids and supporting the vast bureaucracy may have strained the royal treasury. The power of the nomarchs, the provincial governors, grew steadily over time, as their positions became hereditary and their loyalty to the central authority weakened. This led to a decentralization of power, with provincial rulers asserting more autonomy and sometimes even engaging in local conflicts. Economic hardship, possibly exacerbated by periods of low Nile floods or administrative inefficiencies, also contributed to the decline, leading to social unrest and a weakening of the pharaoh's control. However, this period of disunity was relatively short-lived compared to the long periods of stability. The Middle Kingdom, squashed 2055 to 1650 BCE, saw the reunification of Egypt under the pharaohs of the 11th and 12th dynasties, who re-established central authority and ushered in a new era of prosperity and cultural flourishing. While the Middle Kingdom pharaohs continued to build pyramids, they were generally smaller and less ambitious than those of the Old Kingdom, often constructed of mud brick with stone casings. The focus shifted somewhat from massive royal tombs to more practical projects like irrigation and fortresses. The Middle Kingdom is often characterized by a renewed emphasis on central authority, a flourishing of literature and art, and significant territorial expansion, particularly into Nubia, modern-day Sudan, to secure valuable resources like gold, which was crucial for trade and imperial wealth. The pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom also undertook ambitious irrigation projects, expanding agricultural land and further harnessing the power of the Nile, demonstrating a continued commitment to maximizing the river's bounty. They built fortresses along the southern border to protect their interests and facilitated extensive trade with the Near East, bringing new wealth and cultural influences into Egypt. Crucially, the concept of the afterlife also became more democratized during the Middle Kingdom. While in the Old Kingdom, the elaborate preparations for the afterlife were primarily reserved for the pharaoh and the highest elite. During the Middle Kingdom, the belief in an afterlife and the associated rituals became more accessible to common people. Coffin texts, written on the coffins of non-royal individuals, provided spells and guidance for the deceased's journey through the underworld, reflecting this broader accessibility to eternal life and salvation. This shift indicates a broadening of religious belief and practice beyond the exclusive domain of the royal family. The enduring legacy of ancient Egypt, particularly its Old Kingdom, is immense. The pyramids and temples continue to inspire awe and wonder, standing as timeless symbols of human ambition and ingenuity. Its religious beliefs, with their emphasis on the afterlife, divine kingship, and the maintenance of cosmic order, profoundly shaped Egyptian society for millennia. Its writing system, hieroglyphs, preserved a vast body of knowledge and literature, offering invaluable insights into their complex worldview. Egyptian art, characterized by its distinctive conventions, timeless beauty, and symbolic meaning, offers a unique window into their spiritual beliefs and daily life. The Egyptians' mastery of agriculture, their sophisticated administration, and their unique adaptation to the rhythms of the Nile created a civilization of unparalleled longevity and influence, a true kingdom of eternity. The Indus River, originating in the Himalayas, flows southwestward through what is now Pakistan and parts of India, eventually emptying into the Arabian Sea. Like the Nile and the Tigris-Euphrates, the Indus provided the lifeblood for agriculture in an otherwise arid region. Its annual floods, though less predictable than the Nile's, deposited fertile silt, allowing for extensive cultivation of wheat, barley, and other crops. The river also served as a vital artery for trade and communication, connecting diverse regions within the civilization's vast expanse. The geographical reach of the Indus Valley civilization was truly immense, far exceeding that of early Mesopotamia or Egypt. At its peak between approximately 2600 and 1900 BCE, its influence stretched over 1 million square kilometers, encompassing modern-day Pakistan, parts of Afghanistan, and northern and western India. This vast territory contained over 1,000 known sites, ranging from small villages to impressive urban centers, suggesting a highly organized and interconnected society. Unlike Mesopotamia, where cities were often characterized by monumental temples and palaces, or Egypt, dominated by pyramids and pharaonic cults, the defining feature of Indus Valley cities was their remarkable urban planning and sophisticated infrastructure. The two largest and best-known cities, Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, were meticulously laid out, following a grid plan, indicating a high degree of centralized authority and civic organization. This level of urban foresight was unparalleled in the ancient world. Imagine walking through the streets of Mohenjo-Daro. You would find wide, straight thoroughfares, some as wide as 10 meters, running north-south and east-west, dividing the city into rectangular blocks. Houses, built primarily of standardized baked bricks, a remarkable innovation in itself, providing greater durability than sun-dried mud bricks, faced these streets. The consistency in brick size across vast distances suggests a standardized system of measurement and production, indicative of a strong central administration. One of the most striking features of Harappan cities was their advanced sanitation and water management systems. Almost every house in Mohenjo-Daro had its own private bathroom, complete with a bathing area and a toilet. Wastewater was channeled through elaborate brick drains, often covered, running beneath the streets and emptying into larger municipal drains outside the city walls. Many houses also had their own wells, providing a clean water supply. This level of public health infrastructure was astonishingly advanced for its time, far surpassing contemporary civilizations in Mesopotamia and Egypt, where waste disposal was often rudimentary. The cities were typically divided into two main parts: a raised citadel, or acropolis to the west, and a lower town to the east. The citadel, though not necessarily a defensive fortification in the military sense, likely contained important public buildings, possibly including granaries, administrative offices, and ritualistic structures. In Mohenjo-Daro, the citadel housed the Great Bath, a large, carefully constructed public bathing pool, lined with bitumen to prevent leakage. Its precise function remains debated, but it was likely used for ritual purification, indicating the importance of ceremonial practices in Harappan society. Adjacent to the Great Bath was a large granary, suggesting a centralized system for collecting and distributing agricultural surplus. The lower town, where the majority of the population resided, consisted of residential blocks, workshops, and marketplaces. The houses, while varying in size, generally followed a similar layout, centered around a courtyard, providing light and ventilation. The uniformity of the urban layout, and the lack of ostentatious palaces or grand royal tombs, suggest a more egalitarian society than those found in Mesopotamia or Egypt, where immense wealth and power were concentrated in the hands of kings and priests. While there were certainly social distinctions, the evidence points to a more communal approach to urban living. The Indus Valley civilization developed a unique writing system known as the Indus script. Thousands of examples of this script have been found on small stamp seals, pottery, and copper tablets. These seals, often exquisitely carved with images of animals, real and mythical, and human figures, were likely used for administrative or commercial purposes, perhaps to mark ownership of goods or to authenticate transactions. However, unlike cuneiform or hieroglyphs, the Indus script remains undeciphered. Despite numerous attempts by scholars, no bilingual inscription like the Rosetta Stone has been found, and the script appears to be logographic, ord-based, or logosyllabic, with hundreds of distinct signs. The brevity of most inscriptions, typically only a few characters long, further complicates decipherment. This undeciphered script is one of the greatest mysteries of the Indus Valley civilization, preventing us from directly understanding their language, their literature, their history, or their religious beliefs in their own words. Despite the lack of deciphered texts, archaeological evidence provides tantalizing clues about Harappan religion and social structure. Numerous terracotta figurines, particularly those depicting female figures, suggest the worship of a mother goddess or fertility deities. Seals depicting figures in yogic postures or animals with multiple heads have led some scholars to propose connections to later Hindu deities like Shiva, though these interpretations remain speculative. The absence of monumental temples or large-scale cultic centers, unlike Mesopotamia and Egypt, suggests that religious practices may have been more decentralized, perhaps focused on household shrines or public rituals centered around the Great Bath. The Indus Valley civilization engaged in extensive trade, both within its vast territory and with distant lands. Harappan artifacts, including distinctive pottery, beads and seals, have been found in Mesopotamia, indicating a thriving maritime trade network across the Arabian Sea. They likely exchanged agricultural products, cotton, which they were among the first to cultivate, and raw materials like timber, copper, and carnelian for Mesopotamian goods such as wool, silver, and perhaps even administrative expertise. This trade network highlights the interconnectedness of early civilizations and the economic drivers that fueled their growth. The craftsmanship of the Indus Valley people was highly developed. They were skilled metallurgists, working with copper, bronze, lead, and tin to produce tools, weapons, and ornaments. Their pottery was well-fired and often decorated with geometric patterns or animal motifs. They produced exquisite beads from semi-precious stones, often using sophisticated drilling techniques. The uniformity and quality of these crafts across such a vast geographical area suggest a high degree of specialization and organized production. Perhaps the most puzzling aspect of the Indus Valley civilization is its decline. Around 1900 BCE, the major urban centers like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa began to decline, eventually being abandoned. The sophisticated urban planning broke down, the quality of construction deteriorated, and the population dispersed into smaller settlements. The reasons for this decline are not fully understood and are a subject of ongoing debate among archaeologists. Several theories have been proposed. One prominent theory points to environmental changes. Shifts in the course of the Indus River or its tributaries could have disrupted agricultural systems, leading to water scarcity in some areas and devastating floods in others. Evidence suggests a period of increasing aridity and a weakening of the monsoon rains around this time, which would have severely impacted rain-fed agriculture and river levels. Such environmental stress could have made it impossible to sustain large urban populations. Another theory suggests that tectonic activity, such as earthquakes, could have altered river courses or caused widespread destruction, leading to the abandonment of cities. There is also the possibility of disease epidemics, which could have decimated populations in densely packed urban centers. However, there is no direct archaeological evidence to conclusively support widespread epidemics. The Aryan invasion theory, once popular, proposed that nomadic Indo-Aryan tribes from Central Asia invaded and conquered the Indus Valley cities, leading to their destruction. This theory was largely based on linguistic evidence and a misinterpretation of skeletal remains at Mohenjo-daro. Modern archaeological research has largely discredited the idea of a large-scale invasion as the primary cause of decline. While there may have been some migrations and cultural interactions, there is no evidence of widespread conquest or destruction. Instead, many scholars now favor a combination of factors, with environmental change playing a significant role. The decline was likely a gradual process, not a sudden collapse. As environmental conditions worsened, the sophisticated urban infrastructure became unsustainable. People may have migrated eastward, towards the Ganges River basin, where new agricultural opportunities arose. The centralized administration may have gradually lost its ability to manage the vast urban centers, leading to a fragmentation of political and economic power. Despite its mysterious end, the legacy of the Indus Valley civilization is profound. It represents a remarkable example of urban planning, technological innovation, and a unique social structure in the ancient world. Its cities, with their advanced sanitation and grid layouts, were centuries ahead of their time, Its undeciphered script remains a tantalizing challenge, holding secrets that could unlock a deeper understanding of this remarkable culture. The Harappan civilization stands as a powerful reminder that complex societies can arise in diverse geographical contexts, each with its own solutions to the challenges of organizing human life on a grand scale. The Indus Valley civilization, though lost to us in terms of its written narrative, speaks volumes through its meticulously planned cities, its sophisticated crafts, and its unique cultural artifacts. It reminds us that the story of early civilization is not a singular narrative, but a mosaic of diverse human experiences, each contributing to the rich tapestry of our shared past. The echoes of its advanced urbanism and its enigmatic decline continue to fascinate and challenge historians and archaeologists, urging us to continue seeking to understand this truly remarkable and pioneering civilization. The period following the Ur-III dynasty saw Mesopotamia once again fragment into a collection of competing city-states. Among these, the city of Babylon, initially a relatively minor player, began to assert its influence. Located strategically on the Euphrates River, Babylon was well positioned to control trade routes and agricultural lands. It was under the leadership of Hammurabi, who reigned from approximately 1792 to 1750 BCE, that Babylon rose to become the dominant power in Mesopotamia, forging an empire that stretched from the Persian Gulf to Assyria. Hammurabi was a shrewd politician and a formidable military leader. He spent the early years of his reign consolidating his power within Babylon and strengthening its defenses. He then embarked on a series of military campaigns, initially forming alliances with neighboring states to defeat common enemies, and then turning on his former allies to expand his own dominion. Through a combination of diplomacy, strategic alliances, and decisive military victories, he systematically conquered the major city-states of Mesopotamia, including Larsa, Mari, and Eshnunna, bringing them under Babylonian rule. Unlike the Akkadian Empire, which was largely built on conquest and maintained through military might, Hammurabi's empire sought to establish a more stable and integrated system of governance. While military force was certainly a tool, Hammurabi understood the importance of effective administration, economic prosperity, and crucially, a unified legal framework to bind his diverse territories together. It was this vision that led to his most famous and enduring legacy, the promulgation of his comprehensive law code. The Code of Hammurabi is one of the oldest deciphered legal codes in human history, dating to around 1754 BCE. It is famously inscribed on a large diorite stele, nearly 2.5 meters tall, which was discovered in 1901 in Susa, modern-day Iran, where it had been taken as war booty by an Elamite king centuries after Hammurabi's reign. The top of the stele depicts Hammurabi standing reverently before Shamash, the Babylonian god of justice, who is seated and presenting the king with the symbols of his authority, a rod and a ring. This image powerfully conveys the idea that the laws were divinely ordained, given to Hammurabi by the gods themselves, thus legitimizing his rule and the legal system. The stele is divided into three main parts: a prologue, the laws themselves, and an epilogue. The prologue extols Hammurabi's virtues as a just and benevolent ruler, chosen by the gods to bring order and prosperity to his land. It lists his achievements, including building temples, digging canals, and conquering territories. The epilogue reiterates his commitment to justice and warns future rulers not to alter his laws, invoking curses upon those who would disrespect his legacy. The core of the stele consists of 282 laws, arranged in a logical sequence, covering a wide range of legal issues relevant to Babylonian society. These laws address family law, marriage, divorce, inheritance, adoption, property law, land, houses, slaves, loans, commercial law, contracts, trade, debt, and criminal law, assault, theft, murder. The code is not a theoretical treatise on justice. It is a practical guide for judges and administrators, providing clear precedents and penalties for various offenses. One of the most famous principles enshrined in Hammurabi's code is the concept of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, lex talionis. This principle, while seemingly harsh to modern sensibilities, represented a significant step forward in legal thought. It meant that punishments were intended to be proportionate to the crime, rather than arbitrary or excessive. It also limited vengeance, ensuring that retribution did not escalate beyond a defined measure. However, it is crucial to note that the application of this principle was not universal. It often depended on the social status of the individuals involved. For instance, if a noble injured another noble, the eye for an eye principle might apply literally, but if a noble injured a commoner, the penalty might be a fine. This highlights the hierarchical nature of Babylonian society. The code reveals much about the social structure of old Babylonian society. It recognized three main social classes: the Orwylum, free persons, typically nobles or landowners; the Mushkanum, commoners, often dependent clients or small landowners; and the Wardum, slaves. The laws prescribe different penalties and rights based on an individual's social status, reflecting the stratified nature of their society. For example, a doctor who caused the death of a noble might have his hands cut off, but if he caused the death of a slave, he might only have to pay compensation to the slave's owner. Hammurabi's code also provided protections for certain vulnerable groups, such as widows and orphans, and regulated various aspects of daily life. It set minimum wages for certain professions, regulated prices for goods and services, and established rules for landlord-tenant relationships. It even included laws regarding professional responsibility, such as penalties for a builder whose house collapsed and killed its occupants. This level of detail demonstrates the comprehensive nature of the code and the state's role in regulating economic and social interactions. The promulgation of a written law code had profound implications. Firstly, it established the principle of the rule of law. By making the laws public and accessible, it meant that justice was not entirely dependent on the arbitrary will of a local ruler or judge. Citizens could, in theory, know their rights and responsibilities, and legal decisions could be based on established precedents. This fostered a greater sense of order and predictability within the empire, which was crucial for maintaining stability across diverse regions. Secondly, the code served as a powerful tool for centralizing authority. By issuing a single comprehensive law code that applied across his vast empire, Hammurabi asserted his authority over all his subjects, regardless of their local customs or traditions. It was a clear statement that the king's law was supreme and that justice flowed from the central government. This helped to integrate the conquered territories into a unified legal and administrative system. Thirdly, the code served as a model for future legal systems. While later law codes might have differed in their specific provisions, the very idea of a comprehensive written body of laws publicly displayed and applied across a large territory was a concept that would be adopted and adapted by subsequent civilizations. Its influence can be seen in later legal traditions in the Near East and beyond. Beyond his law code, Hammurabi was also a skilled administrator. He oversaw extensive public works projects, including the construction and maintenance of irrigation canals, which were vital for agricultural productivity. He built temples to various gods, demonstrating his piety and reinforcing the religious legitimacy of his rule. He also maintained a powerful and efficient army, which was essential for both expanding and defending his empire. His letters, discovered by archaeologists, reveal a king deeply involved in the daily administration of his realm, dealing with everything from judicial disputes to agricultural matters. The Old Babylonian Empire under Hammurabi marked a period of significant cultural flourishing. Babylonian art and literature continued to develop, building upon the Sumerian and Akkadian traditions. Cuneiform remained the primary writing system, and scribal schools continued to train generations of literate administrators. Mathematics and astronomy also saw advancements, with Babylonian scholars making detailed observations of celestial bodies and developing sophisticated mathematical tables. However, like all ancient empires, the Old Babylonian Empire was not destined to last forever. After Hammurabi's death, his successors struggled to maintain control over the vast territories he had conquered. Internal rebellions and external pressures from various groups, particularly the Kassites from the Zagros Mountains, gradually weakened the empire. The final blow came around 1595 BCE, when the Hittites, an Indo-European people from Anatolia, launched a devastating raid on Babylon, sacking the city and effectively ending the Old Babylonian dynasty. This marked another period of fragmentation in Mesopotamia, with the Kassites eventually establishing a long-lasting dynasty in Babylon. Despite its eventual decline, the Old Babylonian Empire and the reign of Hammurabi represent a crucial chapter in the story of civilization. Hammurabi's code, in particular, stands as a monumental achievement, a testament to humanity's early efforts to establish a systematic and comprehensive framework for justice and social order. It moved beyond arbitrary rule to embrace the concept of codified law, publicly accessible and applied across a vast territory. This commitment to the rule of law, even if imperfectly applied, laid a fundamental groundwork for the development of more complex legal systems in the future. The legacy of Hammurabi is not just about the specific laws he enacted, but about the very idea that a powerful ruler could bring order and justice through a written code. It demonstrated that a unified legal system could be a powerful tool for governance, integrating diverse populations and providing a framework for stability and prosperity. The echoes of Hammurabi's vision of a society governed by clear and publicly known laws would resonate through millennia, influencing legal thought and practice far beyond the plains of ancient Mesopotamia. His stele stands as a silent but powerful witness to humanity's enduring quest for justice and order in a complex world. The most fundamental contribution of these earliest civilizations was the very concept of settled, organized human life. The Neolithic Revolution, the transition to agriculture, was the bedrock upon which all subsequent complexity was built. The mastery of cultivating crops like wheat, barley, and rice, and the domestication of animals like sheep, goats, and cattle, allowed for food surpluses. This surplus, in turn, freed a portion of the population from the constant pursuit of sustenance, enabling labor specialization. Without this agricultural foundation, the emergence of cities, with their diverse populations and complex economies, would have been impossible. Every time we eat bread, rice, or meat, we are partaking in a legacy that began with the pioneering farmers of the ancient world. The city itself is perhaps the most enduring legacy. Before Sumer, human settlements were largely villages, limited in size and complexity. The Sumerians, particularly in Uruk, invented the city as we know it, a dense concentration of people, organized into distinct social classes, with specialized labor, monumental architecture, and a centralized administration. This urban model, with its grid plans, public spaces, and sophisticated infrastructure, laid the blueprint for all future cities. The challenges of urban living, managing resources, sanitation, public order, and defense, were first confronted and addressed in these early metropolises. Our modern urban centers, with their complex systems of governance, infrastructure, and diverse populations, are direct descendants of these ancient prototypes. The invention of writing stands as one of humanity's greatest intellectual achievements, a true turning point in history. From the administrative needs of Sumerian temples, proto-cuneiform evolved into a sophisticated system capable of recording laws, literature, history, and scientific observations. Egyptian hieroglyphs served similar purposes, preserving a vast body of knowledge on papyrus and monumental inscriptions. Writing transformed the nature of human communication and memory. It allowed for the accumulation of knowledge across generations, the codification of laws, the administration of vast empires, and the creation of enduring literary traditions. Without writing, the complex bureaucratic states of Mesopotamia and Egypt could not have functioned. Every book we read, every document we sign, every digital text we consume owes its existence to the pioneering scribes who first pressed reeds into wet clay. The concept of law and justice, too, finds its earliest formalized expressions in these ancient civilizations. While oral traditions of justice existed, Hammurabi's code, with its 282 laws inscribed on a public scale, represents a monumental step towards the rule of law. By making laws public and applying them across a vast territory, it established a precedent for a systematic and comprehensive legal framework. It aimed to bring order and predictability to society, moving beyond arbitrary rule. While its application was often stratified by social class, the very idea of a codified legal system, designed to regulate human behavior and resolve disputes, laid a fundamental groundwork for all subsequent legal traditions, including those that underpin modern democracies. The development of sophisticated governance and administration was another critical contribution. From the centralized temple economies of Sumer to the vast bureaucracies of the Egyptian pharaohs and the administrative innovations of Hammurabi's empire, these civilizations pioneered methods for organizing large populations and managing complex states. They developed systems of taxation, labor mobilization, public works, and military organization. The roles of kings, priests, viziers, and scribes emerged, forming the early prototypes of government officials and civil servants. The very idea of a state, with its defined territory, centralized authority, and capacity to mobilize resources, was forged in these ancient river valleys. Technological advancements were also profound. The invention of the wheel, first used for pottery and then for transport, revolutionized agriculture, trade, and warfare. The plow dramatically increased agricultural productivity. Metallurgy, the working of copper, bronze, and later iron, led to more efficient tools, weapons, and artistic creations. Sophisticated irrigation systems transformed arid lands into fertile breadbaskets. Architectural innovations, from the mud brick ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the stone pyramids of Egypt, demonstrated unparalleled engineering prowess and the ability to mobilize vast labor forces for monumental projects. These technological leaps fundamentally altered human capabilities and laid the foundation for future innovations. Mathematics and astronomy, driven by practical needs like land surveying, accounting, and calendar keeping, saw significant advancements. The Sumerians developed a base 60 number system, which still influences our division of time and circles. The Egyptians developed sophisticated geometry for pyramid construction and land measurement. Their observations of celestial bodies, though often linked to religious beliefs, laid the groundwork for later scientific inquiry. These early forays into abstract thought and systematic observation were crucial steps in humanity's intellectual development. Even the concept of empire, with its ambition to unite diverse peoples and territories under a single rule, originated in Mesopotamia with Sargon of Akkad. While often achieved through conquest, the idea of a large multi-ethnic state with a centralized administration became a recurring model for political organization throughout history. The challenges of governing such vast entities, of integrating diverse cultures, and of maintaining stability were first confronted by these early imperial powers, providing lessons that would be relearned by successive empires for millennia. Finally, these civilizations left us with a rich tapestry of art, literature, and religious thought. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the pyramid texts, and the hymns and myths of Mesopotamia and Egypt provide invaluable insights into their worldviews, their spiritual beliefs, their moral codes, and their understanding of the human condition. Their art, from the intricate cylinder seals of Sumer to the timeless sculptures and tomb paintings of Egypt, offers a visual narrative of their lives, their gods, and their aspirations. These cultural expressions continue to inspire artists, writers, and thinkers today, reminding us of the enduring power of human creativity and the universal themes that connect us across time. In essence, the oldest civilizations were not just historical curiosities. They were the laboratories of human experience, where the fundamental building blocks of complex society were first forged. They invented the tools, developed the systems, and conceived the ideas that would shape the course of human development for thousands of years. From the way we organize our cities, to the laws that govern us, from the act of writing to the very concept of the state, the echoes of these ancient pioneers resonate in every aspect of our modern world. Understanding their achievements and their struggles is not merely an academic exercise, it is a journey to the roots of our own civilization, a recognition of the profound and lasting legacy of those who first dared to build a kingdom of eternity.